Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to Housing Today with Kayla. I'm the founder of Ontario Landlords Watch. We are an advocacy group for good landlords, good tenants, and taxpayers. Wow, I'm shocked to see how many people that we have on our screen because we usually just have like one or two, but this is a big issue that is not only happening in London, but it's happening everywhere in Ontario. And a part of this channel is a way for us to educate our viewers on what's happening and what rules and regulations are coming to the real estate industry, how it's impacting the real estate industry. And the better way to do it is to have an open, healthy conversation with as many people as we can in order to have a deep understanding of how it's going to impact the industry. So before I get into how this is all going to unravel tonight, I want our guest speakers, which we might have some secret ones coming in. We might, that might happen. But I want you to start to learn who the guests are tonight, and so that we can have a nice discussion about short-term rental licensing that's being proposed in London. So let's start off with Taylor. Taylor, please, thank you so much for coming on and speaking up over this.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Taylor Sears. I live in Mount Bridges. I actually used to live in London. Our primary portfolio actually is in Chatham. So we have a combination of long-term and short-term rentals in Chatham. Chatham hasn't started with the regulations yet, but definitely very involved with the London community. Yeah. And have also used Airbnbs in London for contractors and whatnot also. So.
Awesome. Adam, thanks so much for coming on. You definitely, we're talking behind stage and you're very passionate about this. And I love to see that passion. And not only that, but you're speaking up and advocating for this industry. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. My name is Adam Wayland, and I have a host in London, Ontario. I'm also a volunteer community leader for Airbnb. So basically I just speak with hosts, talk to hosts, help hosts solve problems, engage with the city, engage with neighbors, and try and make everything smooth. So I'm here to make sure that regulations are not overreaching.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adam. You're quite the gentleman there, helping everybody out in that community.
Thanks.
And we have Daryl.
Hi, my name is Daryl Wood. I'm an Airbnb operator in London. I have about 10 Airbnbs in London that I manage for myself as well as other people. And yeah, I'm just, I just want to try to make sure that we do the right thing.
Perfect. And it's Paresh?
Yes, perfect. My name is Paresh Soni. I am a landlord, and I know Daryl, and through Daryl, I'm connected to Kayla and the rest of the group. And again, yeah, I think I just want to make sure that the regulations, as you said, Adam, are not overreaching, and to make sure that we still preserve our freedom as Canadians to be able to do what we want to do from a business perspective, including residential real estate.
Well said. Well said. Now, for anyone we always have our long-term rentals. Who wants to explain what short-term rentals are all about? Give us an overview of what a short-term rental is and what governs you.
Want me to go?
Adam, all right. Smile on his face. Let's go, Adam.
There's a lot of, it can be defined in many different ways, actually. We just talked before we went live, we talked about, how pandemic stays were a thing, and, Airbnbs provided that transient housing and the availability for not only nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals on the front line to have a safe place to quarantine or a safe place to be away from their families so that their families were safe. We provide housing and places, good places, for newcomers, for, traveling professionals. London just got the City of Music UNESCO designation. That's huge, but everyone knows, musicians don't stay, 20 years in one city. They don't lay roots. They go from place to place. So we provide housing flexibility. We provide safe, awesome, good places for people to either vacation, visit their family if they've previously from London. There's many different reasons. And it can be from 1 day to, 364 days. It can be longer than 364 days. It all depends on the situation, but short-term rentals is basically not a lease. and it
You can
allows.
rent it out for like the week, and you can rent it out for a couple of days, or you can rent it out for, or a couple of months to people. Is that what we're kind of categorizing as short term? Just like if you have workers coming into the city and they
Right.
want to stay there just to kind of work. So that's the part of and it all goes through the Airbnb channel.
Airbnb, or there's other operators, of course, or platforms that other hosts will use, and that's fine. The number one thing I think is that we are still part of the housing stock, and I think that people need to understand that we're an important part of the housing stock because we provide flexibility for cities, we provide flexibility for citizens, visitors, all those different things. So short-term rentals, yeah, like you said, 1 day to 365 days, pretty much how it goes. No lease though, which is cool.
Now for your host, so you have a host, and how does that work? Like, so is there like some way of them kind of policing the people who are able to rent out their rental units as a short-term rental host?
A host is basically just a landlord. Airbnb is essentially it's basically an executive rental. So it just provides flexibility. It provides a furnished rental for someone that has pretty much whatever they need. Like if they need it for a month or for a week or whatever, it's just an alternative housing solution is basically all it is.
Especially for the tenants who are, having to leave because the owner is now selling their long-term rental unit, and now they have an option to go short-term until they're finding that permanent long-term residence.
That's 100%, Kayla. Actually, I have quite a few tenants that are in that situation where their landlord just happened to sell. And in London, we have less than, I think, a 1% vacancy factor. So a lot of tenants are having a really, really difficult time finding housing. And sometimes it may take them 3 months. And for them, Airbnb is the solution, because what it does is it provides flexibility for them to have a place to stay and a roof over their head, basically until they're able to find long-term housing.
And Taylor, can you answer, like, what do you look for in a tenant or a guest for in short-term rentals? What's the process? Walk me through the process before you accept them as short-term tenants.
So I have, I can't think of what the feature's called, like Instant Book. I have Instant Book on, and then, so I have Instant Book set up. So if a guest automatically or already has their profile set up, they have photo ID and government ID in there, a photo uploaded and have a good review, they can instantly book. If they don't, then I always ask, what brings you to town, basically, a nice way of saying, like, why do you want to rent? And then, like, people typically have great answers, like everybody's mentioned, coming for work, weekend getaway. As long as they have a legitimate reason why they're coming, then I'm basically happy to host them, assuming that they have good reviews. If they have poor reviews, if they have one poor review, I may question them and say, hey, can you explain the situation? What happened? And if I don't feel comfortable with that, then I can decline their booking and say I don't feel comfortable with booking this guest.
Well, you have to be careful. This is your home, just as like we're careful picking tenants for long-term. You also need to make sure that you're doing that for the short-term rentals as well, because obviously anything can happen. But in your experience, have you had any nastiness happening through your experience being a short-term?
Yeah, so I was actually curious about that. So I looked today to see how many stays I've had. So I've had 205 bookings over the Airbnbs, and only once have had to go through Airbnb insurance to fix the problem.
Oh, so you even have Airbnb insurance?
Yes.
You guys out? How fancy is that? Can we get something like that for long term?
I know, I wish. Yeah, air cover is actually really great. You document any issues, send it to them. They send the report to the guest, and the guest can decline or accept it or counter it and whatnot. And you have to show proof of how much things cost for damage, cleanliness, extra cleaning fees and whatnot. And then Airbnb will actually reimburse you for the issue, for any extra fees you had, assuming you have documentation and proof of everything and followed their procedures.
Wow. And what's the fee that you have to pay to Airbnb for this type of service?
So I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we pay 3%, and then they pay, I don't know what they
13,
pay.
I believe it is. 3 and 13, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually between 13 and 16% the guest will pay. Depending on the listing type, there's different kinds of listings like plus and all that stuff. So another thing to point out, I've been hosting for 10 years, and I've only had to remove people 4 times in 10 years. And
Yeah.
the other important part, Kayla, here is that, in the long-term landlord game, if there's a problem guest that arrives, like Taylor said, we vet these people based on the available data. Airbnb vets these people too. But if we have a bad guest, that guest is there maybe for a weekend or a week, and we can go and remove those people. We cancel the reservation, we go to the property, and we remove them. So that's the important part that cities and municipalities don't understand. You have a problem tenant that's in a building that's got a 1-year lease. That person is going to be there for at least a year, probably 17 months if it has to go to tribunal. So we can eliminate those problems within hours. We don't have to wait for anybody. We go there, your reservation's canceled, you must leave the property. So that's an important part to note, because it gives landlords a lot more rights for their properties and protections for their properties.
And that's actually a really good point. The resolution center with Airbnb actually kind of operates very similar to tribunal. The only difference is they can usually solve issues within like 24 hours, which is why a lot of us love it, because one of the biggest problems we have in Ontario is the tribunal and just how slow and cumbersome and how many issues. And then this basically app comes in and solves all the problems, has everything, has a built-in mediation system, has an insurance policy, it's literally the solution to everything that we're dealing with. And for some reason, I don't know why the counselors, they don't like it.
Now, Paresh, we got to get you in on this conversation. What made you get into short terms? What was what is short terms doing for you for your future? Because it's not like a get rich quick, because you guys put some blood and sweat into this type of industry. It's a lot of work, and that's why a lot of people don't go into it. But what made you get into it?
Yeah, I think, they say blood, sweat, and tears. I think I haven't reached the blood part yet, and I hope I never do. But the sweat and tears, I think every landlord, regardless of country, location, can tell you about it. The reason why I'm a huge fan of Airbnb, and again, just to reiterate Adam and Taylor's point and Daryl's point, there's a certain thing called accountability, right? And it's inherent, like it's a kind of an Uber model in Airbnb. And the reason why these brands are global, and again, let me underscore the word global. They're in 100+ countries and they're thriving. And the reason why they're thriving is because if I'm a good person, if I'm a good tenant, I'm a good tenant in Finland, I'm a good tenant in Canada. And that's the beauty about this whole thing, is it's a kind of a social accountability that inherently occurs. Whereas what we see in the LTB, and I think everyone in Canada who's a landlord understands that really the LTB is almost, you could almost say the laws are so negative towards the landlords that it's, I nicknamed it the landlord torture board. I mean, and that's what I see it as. And touch wood, we are very careful about what kind of tenants we get, and we vet them out properly, and we have a very, very strict process. Despite that, when they get into financial hardship, all of a sudden it becomes a landlord's problem, and they stop paying. And it's just been, fortunately not too many cases, but right now I'm going through a case where I'm already out $15,000, and because of the large portfolio, I can handle it. But what about the person who has 3 or 4 units? So I think it's, we are actually affecting, the laws are actually, we talk about human rights and we talk about equality, but how come we always talk about the tenant? And how come we talk about people who refuse to take responsibility for paying? I rent my car and I pay for my car. And how come, I don't think I can get away from that. So why is it that I can rent a place, trash it, and then get away with that? And it's not easy. I mean, it's the LTB process is extremely hard, and it's again designed to make you go away and just kind of take the hit of a loss. So that being the background, to answer your question, Kayla, this is why I think Airbnb, it's not just about the money. There's a lot of work that goes into Airbnb, the setup, the staging, the vetting, the insurance, and all of that. In some ways, it's more complicated than a lease, but it's the right thing to do. It's I don't get away with anything as a landlord, and neither does a tenant. And it's a fair exchange of goods and services, which it should be. And I think that's really what I can say. I mean, and the beauty of this is, short-term rentals, is there a need for short-term rentals? The answer is, of course, yes. I mean, what does a person do who just came into town, who's got a family, who needs a kitchen to cook?
Yes.
The Hilton and the Delta Armories does not have a kitchen.
Yeah.
So how do we ignore the most obvious market that's right in front of us? And this is why Airbnb has thrived again globally, and they're not an overnight brand. And I think this, and so the very fact that we're even talking about this seems like a silly discussion, because the answer is, of course, it should be allowed. And I don't even know why, the council members and the city, the local government, I think it's I don't even know why we're having this conversation, frankly. But yeah, that's why I got into it.
We know what I definitely feel your pain there. And as you can see, like you've had that so that $15,000 debt, was that with a long-term tenant that you've had and you've kind of went through the process?
It's 15,000 and counting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you know what, when we first got into like my advocacy and listening to landlord cases, you had that 5,000, at the most. And now we're seeing like 20,000, 24,000. Like you can see the issue of Residential and Tenancy Act and Landlord and Tenant Board getting worse and worse and worse. That of course now they think a lot of our landlords that are in long-term are jumping ship and getting into the short-term accommodations in a way to avoid having to go through the Residential and Tenancy Act. And this is probably why the city has stated that they believe that it's taking away affordability. So they think that they're going to try to push your hand in getting the licensing so that they can obviously get a piece of the pie. But at the same time, they think that you're going to say, okay, I'm not going to make the piece of the pie. I'm going to have to switch it back to long-term rentals. If that was the case, would you go that way? Or is this fee just being passed on to the tenants that are now going to be your next short-term tenant? Who wants to answer that one?
I'll quickly answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a statistical answer to this, but let me ask at least the people who are on the call. How many of us would convert if the city suddenly said that you're not allowed to have an Airbnb? How many? Let's say I had 100 units. Let's say I had 500 units, and I know people who do, right? Mm-hmm. Ask them, out of the 500 units, let's say they were all Airbnbs, how many of those would be converted to low-income housing? The answer would be 0. Mm. So it's like, and the analogy I draw is, you're going to shut the keg down because McDonald's is losing business.
Yep.
And this is the concept, right? So we got to go based on why they're going to try to introduce this type of licensing, and understanding that we have a bigger issue. If they're trying to do this to create affordable housing, this is not the way. This is obviously, the short-term rentals are a way that it's providing a service into the community that is very much needed through the COVID, very much needed through transitioning through homes, definitely need it for when you have 4 kids and you want to travel and that hotel room is so tight with 2 beds. Oh my God, please give me a short-term so that we can live and enjoy our vacation in peace. And knowing that, now that they would try to implement this type of licensing, which can technically be another cash grab, seeing what they can pull out of it. But how are they also going to try to police this at the same time? Are we spinning our wheels, or should we be using the resources and the time that these counselors have to understand that they need to be advocating at the provincial level in order to help the investing community and the tenants in creating solutions that are really addressing the housing crisis here? Because for me, short terms are needed. And Daryl, what is the percentage of our rentals that are considered short term?
About 1%. So it's a very niche market, but I feel like it's very essential because not everyone just needs a 1 year lease. And not only that, as like an investor, I prefer renting to short term people, just because the people I deal with, like I have quite a few properties that are by the hospital. So I had a lady that was in for chemo, and she just wanted to basically have a place to stay where she could bring her dog and her whole family could be around her. And I like enjoy helping people like that. Or during the pandemic, I took on countless people for quarantining. So like, it made me feel really good to be part of the whole effort to fight COVID. And when we had the vaccine mandates and we lost a ton of our healthcare staff, they brought in all kinds of people from Toronto, and I housed all those people. So like, just being part of the community and helping the community is why I like doing what I do. And I know me personally, like if this bylaw goes into effect, I'm just going to invest in a different city, because I don't want to be in a city and invest and put my hard-earned money and like effort and work into a city that just doesn't even let me run my business and wants to basically just like, not let me thrive.
Same thing like landlord licensing. When they introduced landlord licensing in Waterloo and even in the London, it's always pushing that, it's discouraging the investors from coming into the city. It's discouraging the developers from wanting to come into the city. They have to create more incentives for landlords and developers to want to invest in there and to clean up the areas. Now, Taylor, you were talking about, in the rough area was Chatham. Like, what are the people saying about short terms in their community, because it's what is it doing for them?
Yeah, saying like in general, in Chatham, we've had like neighbors are typically pretty happy with the renovations and the changes that we're making, as there's a lot of properties that need a little bit of love. Most of our short-term rentals are actually in multifamily. So we'll have like a fourplex with 3 long-term tenants and 1 short-term, and we actually never have issues between them at all. It's often where like the long-term tenants are like, hey, is this available so I can like have families stay over, or they're helping us like take up garbage and do other things with the unit. So it's so beneficial.
So you guys had a council meeting. So through this council meeting, how many hosts or landlords were actually taking part in this council?
I would say mostly it was hosts that showed for the public participation meeting. Can we just go backwards for a couple minutes, because I have a couple of things to touch on? Yeah. So just like Presh and Taylor, and I don't know if Daryl has a mix, but we have a mix. I also do property management, so I manage other people's long-term rentals. And I think what people don't get is, yes, I have the ability and I have the privilege to own a second home. And, I've worked very hard for that, just like I'm sure Presh and Daryl and Taylor. We've all done our part. Some of my units are rent controlled. They've been rent controlled for people have been in there for 13 or 14 years. They pay next to nothing. They also are not high maintenance, right? You don't hear from them. That's the kind of people that we want. We keep them there. So yes, just like Presh, the same thing. He has a large enough portfolio that he's able to offset that 15 grand. Just like me, I'm able to offset that person who's been rent controlled for 14 years and is paying less than half of market rent for that unit. And the gains that I make from Airbnb cover that person's, cover that difference for me. The next part is council, money grabbing, basically. I don't want to say that there's not a need for some kind of standards in Airbnb, but here's the thing with Airbnb is if you don't maintain standards, and that's inside and outside of your home, then the system will automatically purge your listing. So it's not like a long-term landlord who hadn't cut the grass in 3 years and someone across the street has to call the city 15 times to enforce an existing bylaw to get someone to cut the lawn. So the problem is that there's already existing bylaws to quell most of the problems that the city has. I understand that they want to get ahead of the curve because there are a lot of other cities in Ontario who have massive short-term rental amounts. Like Calgary, Calgary has 1.2 million people, I think, and there's 16,000 Airbnbs there. London has 440,000 people and we have 600 Airbnbs. So, do the ratio comparison, and we don't have a problem in London. I understand that, again, they're trying to get ahead of it, but the problem with overreach in regulations is that Airbnb is going to come to the table. No other people are going to come to the table. And you said to Presh, are you going to go back to long term? No, we're not going to go back to long term. We're going to list on Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, VRBO, Booking.com, and none of those people are going to come to the table with council. None of those people are going to pay the VAT. None of those people are going to have good standards. And that's where people like us who have multiple properties, we maintain those properties. We employ other people to maintain those properties. We employ other people in different areas, cleaners, lawn maintenance guys, you name it. All that stuff will go by the wayside because we don't have to maintain them because we're not on Airbnb and we don't get reviewed. So I won't cut the lawn.
No, absolutely. And I'd like to add to that, Adam. I mean, so let's get back to the point at hand, which is that the city saying that they have a low income housing problem. Okay. So again, I think we've thrown everything in the kitchen sink at the problem, but we're throwing the wrong arguments at the problem. The real problem is low income housing. Again, and we know that Airbnb by default, by its very nature, like it or not, becomes a premium solution because you're accountable. Right. So that it's at least a B plus, A minus, A level property, right? For all the people who know property. So coming back to low income housing. So the low income housing. So right now I'm in the process with a partner of mine. We are building an apartment building, which will be ready probably in a year or two. And the way the government has done it well, and this I'm going to give you a good example of how they're solving the low income housing is, let's just say we have 20 units. So there's a certain percentage of our units, and I think it's about 20%. So let's just say 4 units. We have to show, in order to get the CMHC loan, and which is really an attractive deal for us. So they're putting the carrot in front of us, saying that if you give me 20% low income housing, I'll give you a really good loan. Guess what? We'll bite. So here we are. So now imagine 4 apartments out of 20 are low income housing. Now I just solved what? So 20%, well, let's say I had 100. So 20% of my portfolio suddenly became the solution for the city.
And Parish, that's where the things go wrong. Council's pointing to us as the problem, and really we're the solution because everyone has a mix of long and short term here. Everyone has the ability to offset someone's lower market rent, and then push into council in London has a very poor track record of maintaining affordable housing stock. There's a perfect example, corner of Viscount and what is it? Viscount and what? Oh my God. Anyways, Viscount and
friend Adam. You can't be calling a friend on the show.
Yeah, sorry. Anyways, so there's probably, I think it was 70 units, and it was townhouses. People had lived there for 25 and 30 years since they were built. The city allowed the owner of that property to evict everyone, convert it to condominiums, sell those to the highest bidder, and now every single person who's lived in those units for 25 years under rent control now needs to pay market rent. So the same council who's done that, I mean, it's not the same council. This council has put a lot of money, effort, and energy into affordable housing. I would say the last council and a half, maybe. But that's not good enough. We've been doing this the whole time, and we're partners in this. We're not trying to, get under the radar, so to speak.
Yeah, and Adam, I think that's exactly it. I think we are talking about 2 different things here. Okay.
There's going to be a difference, though, guys, with the smaller and the bigger ones, because I love the fact that you're able to take on this loan from CMHC and be able to, give out that 4 units. But we also have the problem with these little landlords there's over 50% of the housing stock is coming from these little landlords. So when they feel squeezed by the province or the municipalities, and that's why they're also wanting to, like right now, there's a mass exodus that I've always talked about through COVID, and a lot of people are heading out to Calgary right now. So they're pulling out of Ontario, going into other provinces, or they're going into other states. So it's not quite that they're going into Airbnbs, but Airbnb does provide that quality of it provides a place for tourism, to keep the money flowing into that community. And if people can't find suitable accommodations, like I said, with big families or something very quick and easy, and knowing that you're doing your due diligence and you're getting in, it knocks the concept parties. This is why they said that it's the source of parties in London. And I was like, I can have a party in my house. Are you going to what are you going to say about that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I went to Costa Rica for 8 days in December. And out of those 5 days in Costa Rica, first time ever in my life, I used Airbnb. It was for a night or 2. So, okay, help me with that. So I was on a big ecological farm, learned a lot about how eco farming and solar works and all of that. And it was one of the best experiences I had, really. So Hilton's going to give me that? Delta
Nope.
Army? going to give me that? So I mean, it's again, it's like saying that there is, you can only plant evergreens, and no perennials are allowed in your backyard. It's as silly as that. It's actually, we shouldn't even be talking about Airbnb. The real problem is a housing problem. And I'm also invested in as an investor in Elite Builders. Elite Builders are from Toronto, and they've negotiated land at Bradley, and they're building 700 units here. Okay, and again, it comes back to it, you can add all the small landlords up with Airbnbs, and they'll be equivalent to not even one big builder.
Yeah.
You've got Tricar, you've got Drulo, you've got all of these guys, and they are building in massive amounts. I'm talking about massive amounts, like, all these big towers that go up, they have 500, 600 units in them. Okay, I come back to the same thing. Incent them to give me 10%. And now imagine if 10 builders give you out of 1,000 units, just 10%, that's 100 units. You just solved the problem. And again, step in as councillors, step in as a city to say, listen, we're going to get people who are, say, government funded or whatever. So I think this problem, again, we're going about it in such a wrong way. We're taking a hammer and just smashing at these small guys, hoping to feel good, but you're not solving the problem.
But you know what also happens when you're doing this type of development, and we do have a developer coming in, and they do have this policy such as, hey, we'll approve this build, but you need to provide some affordable housing. And they tend to say, I'll give you cash in lieu of affordable housing. And so they rather dish out 500,000. Well, it's usually a donation. I don't think there's any set amount of how much a developer can give in, but where does that money go? When are they putting that into government housing? And number two, there is that difference between like the private sector and government housing, and that I think the government needs to be a joint venture with landlords, because they're not really quite doing very well on providing affordable housing or government housing for the backlog. There's a 10-year waiting list here in the region of Waterloo, and when they get money from the province, they're like, yay, we can fix what we have, not build what we have. Let's fix what we have. And here, landlords and investors and short-term rental, we are building, managing, maintaining these properties, and they can't even try to subsidize these tenants who are having financial hardship in order to keep everybody housed.
So speaking of the city, right, and that's a good point. Our permits were we were supposed to break ground next year, but now we're breaking ground in 2024. So again, I come back to my same point here. I am saying, yes, sure, I will take the CMHC. I'll give you 20%, no problem. It's all of that, and all our low-income housing are also handicap accessible. They're on the ground floor, and they're the best units out of the 24, because they're big, tall ceilings, all of that good stuff. So we are like, yes, thumbs up.
Yep.
And they still didn't speed up my application. I'm still a year out late. So again, you're not focusing on the problem. You're just going out of the peripheral noise. And it is actually noise, because even if you shut down every Airbnb, you will make zero impact to your low-income housing problem. So again, you're going after the people, that poor guy. You're just basically, you're hurting small people, honestly. Adam and I maybe, and again, I'm not that big. I'm not a Farhi. But just because I can bleed a little bit more doesn't mean it's okay for me to bleed either. But I think the small guys, and that's what hurts me more than anything else. I've been a small businessman. I'm still, medium-sized business, but it hurts me to see how we're suffocating the entrepreneurship in this country. And this is wrong. It's just morally wrong. Forget all this low-income stuff. We're destroying the very essence and fabric of this country.
You nailed it right on with how long it's taking for you to get your shovels in the ground. And by then, what is your operating cost? What's your material cost going to be? And has that price now increased for you to be the developer side of it? Because we always see our elected officials, and as you know, it's an election year. So we get all these promises, and we have a lot of talk of more restrictions on top of the investment side of things. But when they talk about home ownership in this election, it's always about home ownership. I'm like, do you not know that we do have a group of tenants who
that need housing?
Be tenants. They're not ready for a down payment. They don't have the credit. They want to travel, whatever the case may be. They don't want to be homeowners. We need to still address the supply and demand for those type of tenants.
Suppose Elon Musk doesn't have a home. the richest man on the planet doesn't believe in ownership. So are you going to dictate to me now that for me to have a good life in Canada, I must get a mortgage?
And that's the thing is, you know,
right? Again,
the pandemic created digital nomads, and those people, I have housed so many of them. And we actually have a group that just left, and they used London as like a home base, and they went to Owen Sound, they went to Tobermory, they went to a whole bunch of different places, Windsor, Detroit. And so they used London as a home base, and they basically they all showed up, and they all just had one backpack each. But the world is changing, and you know, removing this would be detrimental to London, I think.
Now, I don't mean to cut you off, guys, just because I want to be able to get, I know we've talked a lot. I want to get as much, because it's about the going on what the council is their reasoning behind this. And for anyone who's watching either live or replay, understand that we need to support each other through this community. Even if Airbnbs or short terms are not your strategy, just know that something else is coming there. So we have to unite ourselves and be supportive with one another, and just share your concept and your thought process to your elected officials to give them the pros and the cons, and give them the real gist of someone who has their boots on the ground, and knowing what they're doing is also going to have that trickle effect into the long-term rentals. And that's where our tenants are also obviously going to be the ones suffering. But we talked about the partiness, you know, we got that out the thing. You guys can clean that up better than a long-term rental property. So long-terms are also a problem for parties and garbage and a ruckus, you name it. Then we have the Airbnbs causing the affordable housing. We talked about that, realizing that we have a bigger issue with the long-term, the Residential and Tenancy Act, the Landlord and Tenant Board, municipal policies and provincial regulations that are really hindering investors from wanting to be in there. But the Airbnb is a corporate enterprise operating a corporate business in a commercial neighborhood. So that was thrown at you guys on the last thing. Who wants to take that one?
I'd like to take that. So I don't understand where this point comes from, because the entire point of Airbnb is a peer-to-peer marketing platform. It allows the little guys, the small people, to be able to work together, to host each other, and it allows the small individual like people just to make extra income. So to call an Airbnb host a corporate enterprise, it makes no sense. It's mind baffling. Like, the entire point of the app and the platform is small time landlords being able to host guests. So I just don't understand where that comes from.
just another way for them to say that you should be treated fairly like the rest of them type of deal.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to work it, and then they get to, and they obviously have no plans. They haven't suggested any plans of how they would, what the fine is going to be like, or what the fee is going to be for a short license.
I think they're trying to kind of compare us to hotels, which is not accurate either, because Airbnbs are just residential rentals, right? All they are is an average typical unit, like Paris said, usually a B plus and up rental unit that's furnished, that we offer flexibility. You know, it's completely legal under the Residential Tenancy Act to rent for a week, for a month, and to provide our tenants with flexibility. So I don't understand how we're the same as a hotel or a corporate enterprise, because we are just residential properties offering a residential tenancy for a flexible period of time.
It's like P2P, right? And I think that's the key word here. Okay, and it's kind of smells and looks like an apple, doesn't mean it is an apple. Okay, so for example, if I am selling, you know, I'm into, say, audio equipment, I sell speakers, I sell 10 speakers, you know, I buy them and sell them from Kijiji from my house. Do I then need to go and become an Ontario Inc., get an HST number and do all of that? Like, seriously? Like, it's so you guys are smiling because it sounds like a silly argument.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when Airbnb is charging sometimes as little as $50 a night, I mean, this is exactly, it's how much small business do you want to get? And here you are, you know, giving massive multi-million-dollar subsidies to the big guys, and just 1/10 of that could solve all our housing problems. So I think, again, it's very typical, you know, of government council like behavior, where they don't approach it as business people. and it's their lack of business acumen is so apparent in their behavior. And I wish they would have a couple of strong business women and men on their team that could just guide them in the right direction, because they are literally missing the goal that's in front of them and going after the twinkling little, street lights. And I think they just don't get it. So first of all, it's a P2P platform. I think it's your human right, it's your Canadian right to do business as you wish. And in this case, you just happen to be selling a space. It's the same as a speaker. It's the same thing. Now, if I get to the level where I'm truly a hotel, I do have to conform to those regulations. So I think in every way there's just absolutely no argument at all that Airbnb is our right to do this, and we don't violate anything. We don't hurt any business here. So.
You're right. It's grasping at straws to see if they can flood the market with that long-term rentals, and they're trying to put pressure on our short-term real estate investors in order to do so. But instead, you're just going to see the opposite. They're going to go to other cities, they're going to go to other provinces, other states, and they're going to still operate the kind of business. And what's going to happen is that maybe you're turning that leaf over and selling that property to a new homeowner who's going to move into it.
Absolutely.
Now you don't have a short-term rental or a long-term rental. So I think it's about constantly pushing landlords in the back burner and saying, hey, we'll need you when we need you. It's like, no, we don't work. We're not a government agency. We shouldn't be having to we're a solution, and we are totally willing to meet with elected officials to sit and talk about the issues that are bigger. It's like an iceberg. Here's the big issue they see the iceberg, and this is the housing crisis, and they see multiple little issues on top, but underneath there's so many other big issues that they're not addressing, because it's almost like political suicide for them to come out and really address the major concerns that are happening. Now, in the Airbnb, they talk about Airbnbs are illegal apartments that don't conform to our current regulation and licensing. So that was another reason. So really their main reason was like the partiness and the affordable housing. And the next one is just they're trying to grasp at straws. Am I correct?
Well, they don't enforce their current bylaws. I live on a street with 41 houses, and there's 6 of them that are long-term rentals, and not a single one of those has a residential rental unit license. So, why are they not being inspected? Why is the fire department not there checking every other year? They need to focus on enforcement of current bylaws. If they enforced current bylaws, all of the problems with Airbnb would be gone. And like Paresh said, the Airbnb is not the problem. So
it's almost like the whole long-term rental license that they have in play, that there's already a system for it. If a tenant felt that they were unsafe, they can call bylaw and property standards to come in. They can make a claim at the landlord and tenant board and get money back from their rent, or even find the landlord there. And they also have the housing enforcement unit with the province. So they're almost like reinventing the wheel. And instead we're not looking outside of the box. Like the definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing and expecting different results. So here we have a group of landlords who are able to come on, give their opinion on why, short-term rentals are definitely a need for the community, as well as how it's so it's nice. I'm thinking about coming over, guys. And then you have the concept that we don't have our elected officials listening to the real issues. Now, if you had your counselors, and I hope you send this video just so that you can send it to them and let them know how good this is. It's good for the city, but also in a way that it's also good for the tenants and for the housing stock in general. What would you want to say to your elected officials of a solution? Like if they think this is the partiness and the affordable housing, what recommendation would you want to give council to shy away from this type of licensing for short-term rentals? Taylor, you want to? Oh, sorry.
We're all like,
I wanted to hit on a point first. I wanted to hit on one point first. Just more of a healthcare issue. So we are still in a pandemic, and I know me personally in London, I provided countless people with quarantining locations. So if we have another outbreak, where are all those people going to go? Have the council members actually thought about that? Like, what about they don't have enough quarantine locations if they get rid of all the short-term rentals. So that's just something I think we should take consider of, because we are still in the middle of a pandemic, right?
I think that council needs to do what we're doing. They need to engage with us. They need to make us their partners.
Collaborate, don't regulate.
Yeah, and but more importantly, if every landlord, every small landlord who had 1 or 2 properties in London could build a carriage house or a garden suite in their backyard, do you know how quickly and privately funded you would solve a crisis of housing? It's like Paresh said, you have 1,000 units, you take 10% of that. That's a lot of units.
There you go.
There's a lot of small landlords in London. There's a lot of small landlords in areas around London. You could resolve an issue very quickly. And if it's all private money, it still has to be inspected. I invite council to engage with us, and I've sent information, and I want to engage. So
I to your point, Adam, I would say, and sorry I have to go. So, but and thank you so much for having me on this webinar. I think this is amazing. Again, when it comes to big business, right? Big business trumps small business in 100-fold, right? Like if you look at the net worth of Drulo and Tricar in London, okay, and add up all private landlords, including myself, and we won't even come close to what they own. Right. They're billionaires. Okay, just to give you an idea. Now, the bigger the fish, the more it can bleed, and the more it's willing to bleed, because now you can give it government programs or whatnot. So to Adam's point, I would go slightly differently. I would say go with the big guys and medium guys who are willing to play like us, and say just make it easy for us, as you said, Adam, become my partner, not my enemy, and I think you're going to solve the problem faster than you can blink. It's going to be a long-term solution, right? But I think the last thing you need to do is just leave the small guy alone, please. Like you're killing the most life. Every economy that did incredibly well was not because of the Apples and the Teslas. It was because of small business. It was because of the small restaurants, the small owners, the small renovation companies. Yeah, those are the ones that really run our economy. And that's why even in Canada, our business laws are for small business below 500,000. So we keep saying that, and we keep on going after the small guys. It's just, we got to stop doing that. And council members needs to understand, just leave the small guy alone. And that includes all the Airbnb people. Go for the bigger guys, negotiate with them, and this problem can be solved. So I think just become more business savvy is my thing. Go talk to the business people who can solve this problem overnight and work with them. And that's my solution.
Crash thing is so
great point. Great point.
Okay. Anyway, I gotta go. I don't mean to be rude.
Thank you, Paresh.
Thank you.
And thanks, Daryl, for the invite.
Okay? Yes, thank you for speaking.
Talk soon.
Bye.
So you guys have it. You guys know exactly what is really needed. And I think the one missing piece that every city is missing is to really have an affordable, we got to watch that word affordable, because we have to watch our housing task force, a nice housing task force where it's a round table of landlords and tenants and business people and entrepreneurs in order to really come together to really address the real issues that each city's having. Sometimes a lot of our regulations that are coming from the province, they always just look at the bigger cities, but because of that, our little ones are starting to feel that pressure. Even when I was driving through Kitchener today and seeing an entire encampment of homeless that's right across from the railway, the brand new, here's the train station, and right there is almost like a tent city. To see that's happening in Canada is understanding that Airbnbs are not the issue. This is not about just the big guys looking to
bigger than that.
It's bigger than that. And in order to have that thought process is that we need to keep our landlords connected with our elected officials. And sadly, there was just a thing that came out with our MPPs. I believe it was the MPs who stated that they're homeowners or landlords themselves, or they're investors, and they have this conflict of interest. And that's another thing that happens when you do have people who understand the system and the industry, and they are elected officials, they have to declare a conflict of interest. So this is where that needs to be put out the window, because we need to be hearing from these people, especially since they know what it's like from the people with boots on the grounds. And we need to be able to try to do whatever we can as taxpayers, because you're not only going to get hit as an entrepreneur with your strategy of what you do for your real estate, but it's really none of their business on how they do it. We just need to understand the bigger issue, and that's to get people housed.
Kale, can I add a couple things? There was an article that I found, it's like community Airbnb, and it's research that Airbnb has done, This is kind of related to hotels and then the local economy. So 74% of Airbnb properties in major cities are located outside of traditional hotel districts. So like a big portion of Airbnbs are not like there's lots downtown. There's also lots outside of the downtown where typical hotels are. And then in terms of that, there's also a guidebook feature on Airbnb. So homeowners or landlords or hosts, however you want to call them, will typically set up a guidebook for their property or their community, recommending local restaurants, stores, things that are nearby, kind of promoting the local economy. And then another point I wanted to make was that 35% of guests reported without Airbnb, they would not have traveled or would have shortened their trip. So it's a pretty good example that like hotels are not the only option, and they're really not the best option either.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. I had a comment here. It says houses, we'll see, but houses should be owned and lived by owners and not to be rented out. That's a very broad statement for the concept that who's going to buy the homes to rent them out? Are we going to think everyone's going to become homeowners? Like there is people.
Well, no, then you're going to have every city is going to just have a Drulol and Tricar and all these big companies who will control 100% of the housing stock. The reason that there are actually affordable housing units right now is because of private landlords, not because of big corporations. So yes, I see his point. It is difficult for people right now, especially younger generation, to get in and buy those homes. And it's not something that I can fix or do. But I think if you let only the big guys win, then there won't be anything affordable. So.
Well, that's where we get. Go ahead, Taylor.
So you also need like a temporary solution for in-between homes. We've had a lot of stays recently as the market has been crazy forever now, where like your closing and your purchase don't typically line up because you're taking your best offer and you need to be out by a certain date. So we've had quite a few stays where people are just out, have no home and need somewhere to live before they can get into their next place. So without an Airbnb, like your whole family is living in a hotel for a few months, is not ideal.
I want to add one more thing that I think is really important, and it's been something that I've been doing since before Airbnb.org was a thing. I host for free or deeply discounted stays where people have had a crisis, a local disaster of some kind. And now I'm hosting, I will be hosting, I'm not hosting them yet, but I will be hosting a refugee family from Ukraine. And I'm doing that for free. So I think I think it's important that people see that, it's not just about the money. There's a lot of flexibility. And do I make good money? Yes, I do. But it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy and effort. I have people who have to help me because it's so busy. But we are able to do things like offer free housing in situations like this. And I think that I have a Ukrainian background, so it's really super important to me. But I've done it for the Afghan refugees when that crisis was happening, and I'll do it for the next crisis and the next crisis. Yeah. So things like that, it's part of the Airbnb
community. It's part of just who we are as hosts.
Yeah.
Andy, we had your comment up there that we know, honey, like we just want to, because that is the typical response that we're seeing is that, they shouldn't have people renting them out. But at the same time, we need more, and we're not seeing a lot more people building single family homes. They're building the condos situation. We're seeing our landlords having to come in and kind of create 2 units. We're seeing homeowners who are buying it with 2 families so that they do renovation. So 2 people can have a home together and they just become joint ventures. That's why I became the ambassador to Front Lobby, so that renters can actually have their rent go towards their credit. So that can help them build their credit so that they can get that loan, so they can have the down payment in order for them to become homeowners. And that's why it's always about that solution, because we know that we do have people trying to pick up these homes and rent them out, but a lot of them are just trying to magnify that and create multiple units instead of just renting them out as single family homes. And we always want to work on different products and different services to help our tenants, because I come from a family of tenants. My husband come from the family of landlords, and now I've been doing this for 20 years, investing into real estate myself. And you get to see the type of people who are out there looking for housing. We want to do whatever we can to accommodate that. That's why we've been very vocal on the channel, being able to try to talk about these issues. Now, next Friday, we're going to be having a discussion on housing itself, the housing report, giving them some really mind-boggling changes that are needed in order to keep people in long-term. So they're not jumping over to short-term. They're just getting out of the business, and they're selling their homes to owner-occupied buyers. So this is something that needs to be said in order for our elected officials to understand that they keep choking out this industry. It's almost like you got them in a quarter. They're going to chew through that wall in order to get out. And that's what we're trying to do, is really try to see what we can do and bringing these entrepreneurs together so we can kind of create it. We're almost at the hour, guys. I want to give you guys another shot to come on and say what you want to say to get the community engaged with you, because if it may not be their strategy, there's more regulations that are going to be coming, because you see the elected officials are trying to address the housing crisis. So if you're into flips and the Airbnbs and joint ventures, rent to owns, whatever the case may be, you know that more is going to be coming to you. So,
Yeah.
she's like, am I me? I'm on the
I was going to say, in point of the argument that there's parties and garbage and stuff, I would, if we're pointing fingers, kind of point it more at student rentals. We've seen how Fleming works, UWO Homecoming, all of those areas are full of parties. Ambulances, a lot of emergency services are required at those times, and garbage. We see September and May student turnover. That's where all the garbage is loading up. Really not on Airbnb.
Actually, I wanted to point out one thing. I host a fair bit of students, and they actually prevent a lot of garbage, because you find a lot of couches and old furniture and stuff in student rentals. Well, when you're renting a furnished rental, it eliminates that problem. So it actually is, it's the solution to a lot of the student garbage.
Yeah.
Adam, what do you got to say before we sign off for the night?
Not much. I'm still processing this whole thing, but we're still part of the housing stock is the number one thing. And just because we do things a little bit differently, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. And, it's unfortunate we only had 5 minutes, Daryl and I, to speak at the public participation meeting, because I could, just like today, I could go on and on for hours. And Kayla, if you don't cut me off, I'll probably just keep going. So basically, I think, there's tons of tools available to council that already exist. All they have to do is ask Airbnb for them. There's a law enforcement portal. There's a city portal where the city has direct access to Airbnb. There's just so many things. And I think focusing on enforcing current bylaws and doing that stuff is going to be the key. And then partner with small-time landlords. We want to build garden suites. We want to build carriage houses. We want to do all those things. So let us do them, and let us provide more spaces for people to live, quality spaces too, that are inspected, fire safe, garbage free, and not nuisance.
Party free.
Party free.
Yeah. And I think the final point is I want to put to all the council members, don't regulate with us. Please just collaborate. We're all trying to solve the same issue. We all have the same objective. Don't regulate us out of an existence, because you know what? We'll just go elsewhere. Like, that's kind of the consensus that a lot of us have, right? If you make it too hard for us to operate our business, then, Chatham, St. Thomas, Sarnia, that's all that's happening.
Or they'll go underground, and then you'll have no one to go to. So
we want to work with you guys. We want to work with council members, but just like I said, collaborate, don't regulate.
Yeah, and they should be having it on their website where someone can reach out to a local short-term rental in order to help with the tourism in London. Because I know I went to a concert in London and needed a short-term accommodation. So it's definitely brought my money to the city. Taylor, Daryl, Adam, I want to thank you. And even for Paresh there, it's fantastic for us to not be on the buzzer where you can actually go back and forth. Now, wish we had some counselors back and forth as well, so that they can say one thing and we can say, well, this this is why it's happening, you know, and they say one thing and this is why it's happening. And this is about the open communication. And I'm looking forward to bringing more content to the channel about the advocacy work that we all need to be a part of, and being very hands-on with our elected officials. And hey guys, it's an election, so really pay attention to who your current counselor is or MPP, and who these candidates are going to be running, because obviously it may not fully get implemented now with the election that's going to be coming up. So you really want to make sure that you're speaking your concerns that you have with your elected officials, sending them the some emails, and really connecting with other community members to inform them what's going on. So if you have short-term rental licensing that's in your area or is planning to be in your area, share this video, comment your thoughts and process of where it's happening within your city, so that we can inform as many people as we can to help them with their real estate investment dreams, and of course keeping our tenants informed of what's happening within their community. I want to thank you all again, and we'll be back for another Housing Today with Kayla. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Kayla.
Thank you.
All right.